All right, welcome to Culture Couch Live this week. G'day, Carly. G'day, Jez.
Hi, Rosie.
G'day, Rosie. How are you, mate?
Now, we've got a little bit of an unfamiliar face on the call today, Murph. So I'm going to hand over to you. I know I'm a great host of Culture Couch Live, but it's fraught with danger, always handing it over to you. But I'm going to get you to introduce your colleague and friend. And now I'll use those terms, but we'll get the guest to confirm whether he's a friend or just a colleague, because I think that's important as well. But Murph, over to you.
We'll work through that. And I'd just like to say that the Culture Couch Live is in very safe hands with me. I'd like to welcome to the Culture Couch Live, Alister Cant. Alister and I have known each other. We've just established for 12 years. I first met Al when he was just a young whippersnipper at Caterpillar. And I ran a workshop. It was in WA at a golf resort over there, I remember. And there was this amazing group of young people who were super highly talented. I remember that that group. Al was just really good young leaders that were always destined to go on to do really interesting things in their careers. So Al and I have stayed in touch, and I'll let him talk through his current position a little bit more in a moment. But Al and I have stayed in touch, and he's now working with WesTrac, which is quite a significant business. It's a massive, I think it's 4 billion turnover, Al.
Yeah, correct.
At about 4,500 people, like it's a big company, and Al's got a senior position. So without any further ado, welcome, Alister.
Thanks, Jared, and thank you, Paul and Carly, for having me on.
Couple of questions.
I also remember that group of young people, and I looked up to them as well, Jared. That group of talented people. I was on the other side, the less talented one.
I think we need to qualify a couple of things about intro. Now, you're talking about talented golfers, or you're talking about talented leaders? Because you're at a golf and you play golf, Al, and Murph, you would be a shocking golfer, so I'm not even going to ask you.
Shocking.
So, Al, welcome to the Culture Couch Live, and you're going to be our guest, and we'll grill you a little bit. But probably my first question would be, in terms of culture, where does it sort of sit in your strategy over the 12 years at Murph, and even Murph mentioned the talent, and we see a lot of talented leaders, really talented in terms of, what they do, marketing, IT, construction, engineering. Very few of the leaders we deal with, guys, is it Carly or Murph, are not talented in a technical sense. When did you realize culture became a really important part of your leadership process?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think early in leadership, when I saw the impacts of a functioning, positive culture where people were supporting each other, collaborating to get shared outcomes, and how much more enjoyable a place that was for me to be and for the team members to be, it really became something that I focused on. And then moving into other roles, it's been one of the first things I've tried to establish before getting into what we're going to do. It's really the team that we're going to do it with. So it's been a reoccurring theme in coming into new leadership roles, that culture is that first bit to focus on, to understand whether you've got the behaviors to get the results that you need to get.
Yeah, excellent. So take us through the process, because we talk about it a lot, and then I'll probably hand over to Carly or Murph to take over. But the process, where does that start, and how do you set up that system?
I think the most successful, it's changed with every kind of new role that I've gone into, but I think the more that I've gone through a process, the more that I've understood the key drivers. I think if I look at where I've had the most success and had the most immediate impact, and it was Jared was involved in this. I came into a role. I wanted to set some really clear behavioural expectations. So we built up a behavioural framework It was based off our values. It was built up from the team. Everyone bought into it. And we effectively agreed to a set of really clear, concise behaviours that we were all going to display, and we were also going to call each other out on if we weren't displaying it. And the reason it had such an immediate and fast impact is because, one, everyone was a part of it.
Yeah.
Everyone empowered each other to call each other out if they weren't displaying it. Because it was aligned with values, even though we're a team within a larger team, everyone within our organisation could see that it was values aligned, and it was aligned to what the organisation deemed was important. So I think really that is now become something that I hold really important when I come into a new role is, okay, level set, what do we want to be? How do we want to behave? And let's hold each other accountable to it.
It's a bit like what you talk about, Ruzi, when you start with a new sporting team, isn't it?
Yeah. I like it absolutely, but I love, Al, what you said about everyone doing it together. That was probably the thing that really struck me, isn't it? Because not every now and then, sometimes Carly and Murph, people go, yeah, will people buy in? I haven't seen anyone, not necessarily buy in over the long term, but certainly in that initial sort of workshop, it's, we're going to do this collectively. Like there's actually a sense of engagement immediately, isn't there? And that's what I found with Sydney. Murph, I don't know whether you found the same thing when you did it with Geelong, but I absolutely found that with the guys in Sydney. It was like, oh, wow, we're going to create this together. And I think there's that immediate connection from that very format of bringing someone in and creating it as a group.
Yeah, 100%. Because what it does is it gives everyone a chance to have a fresh start as well. I think that's really important. I don't know if you found that, Al, but sometimes people find themselves in spots they really don't want to be in. But then if you can come in and give people the opportunity to buy into that behavioural framework, then no one can say I wasn't part of it. But more importantly, everyone wants to have a say in how their workplace looks and what's acceptable or not. And so it allows everyone a chance, just as you said, Al, to level set.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that buy-in from the team, and we've had this discussion probably, I don't know if you remember it, Jared, probably 4 or 5 years ago when I went into the current role that I'm in. And we wanted to cascade behaviours through a team of 60 odd people. And we started with a group of 5. And I probably had the opinion there that, like, if these were the behaviours of the people leading the team, then everyone can buy into it. And you know, we probably established through discussion that that's not the way that it's going to work. So we actually pulled everyone together for a couple of days, got them all into a room, broke out into smaller groups, and we then came together and set a behavioural expectation that was really clear, listed out that, you know, what everyone in that team wanted to display to be recognised as the team that they saw themselves as. And then we actually took that, we put it, and it sounds a bit gimmicky now when I look back at it, but I think it was actually very powerful because we were 70 people inside an organisation of probably at the time 13 or 1400. And we took that, we put it on a plaque, we mounted it in glass, and we put those behaviours on everyone's desk around our values, so that it was just that constant reminder of what we're going to hold each other accountable for displaying.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that's a really good, important point, Al, too, about the constant reminder, because we do the exercise with teams a lot. And when they're first getting started, I don't think they realize the importance of that behavioral framework. So they love that they've bought into it, they understand it, but then we go back to the next session and they're like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot, we haven't printed it out, or it's not on the wall. But that comment that you've just made there about making it really visible and really prominent in their day-to-day lives so that they understand the importance of it, I think that has a really big impact. So I think that's great. And the other thing you mentioned too is that you're a smaller team within a larger team, and that people could actually see the change and see the difference in your team. And I think culture is so unfamiliar to so many people, but those behaviors and being able to actually see the change is such a big thing and such a important part of how it works. So I guess my question to you is around getting your team to function within the team and how you got them to understand the importance of the team within that larger kind of organizational framework.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I think I guess to understand it, probably one of the most powerful things is obviously reinforcement. Like, I mean, when you actually make the change, like there's got to be a first step. And I don't think sitting in front of if I thought of myself sitting in front of a team and trying to convince them before we'd actually put into practice the things that we'd committed to do, I'm not sure how effective that would be. Like, to convince everyone that, you're a small part of a wider team, but if you do this, everyone's going to recognize it. It's going to actually have a powerful impact on the wider organization. Do I think everyone's just going to trust me on that? Probably not. So I think you've got to have the buy-in and the process and put the investment into getting everyone to take that first step. And I think one of the things that we did quite effectively in hindsight is we've actually pulled everyone out of their day job, taken them to an offsite, put them into a situation where the symbolism within our culture was that this matters. Like, there's importance in this. We don't have our phones on. We're all in roles that face customers, deliver lots of dollars worth of machinery to an industry, support customers who are really important to our business, but we're turning our phones off for a day and we're doing this because it's very important. So I think if you can make that first step symbolic and make sure it's a reinforcer that this is something that we really care about and we need to care about as a team, and then you put it into practice, as long as the reinforcement's there when it's in practice, I think it just becomes something that gets legs. But no, I'm not sure that, I'm currently I've got a part of sales in my role at the moment, but I'm not sure I'm a good enough salesman to convince people to do it without actually putting it into practice.
What about the benefit, Al, of bringing someone else in? And Murph and I talk about this a lot. And probably prior to me coaching Sydney, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that was that important. You can build a footy team and you can build a culture and we get good people and all that sort of stuff. But I must admit, if I took over a team again, not that I will, I would not want to drive the culture. Sorry, I would drive the culture myself, but the benefit of someone externally coming in, fresh set of eyes, challenges me as a coach, you as a leader, puts the framework in place. I'm just wedded to that now, having done it twice, once at Sydney and once at Melbourne, because you got to be careful, in any organisation, it doesn't become Alister's culture. Oh, this is Ruth's culture. Oh, this is Murph's culture. Oh, here we go again. It's top down, etc. Talk to us about that, because I think that's really, really important that we try and get external people in, because they do have a fresh set of eyes, but they're also going to challenge the leader as well, around those behaviours, which is really important.
Yeah, and I've had the I guess the advantage of seeing it from both sides. So Jared kicked off by talking about when we first met. I'd been in the corporate world for 15 minutes. Like I'd come off. I was a technician originally, and I'd kind of gone into this corporate world, and I'd been there maybe a year and a half, and Jared came in, and I'd never been a part of a process like that. And I felt the power of it was us as a team. And we did things like feedback sessions, behavioral expectations, and the power of seeing everyone on a level, I'll say, footing. Even someone that in the culture that I was in at the time was fairly high power distance. There were people a couple of levels up from me sitting right next to me, copying the same feedback that I was. I absolutely, I saw it from that side. And then, many years later, brought Jared in to do some work with my team, and saw that same power in people, or that powerful kind of symbolic impact that it had on people. And I honestly don't think that I could have gotten the change at the speed that we did without having that support there. And plus, we all have, as you mentioned, Paul, we all have biases. And we have blind spots. And sometimes you need that fresh set of eyes. And we've had many a conversation, Jared and I, over the years that are pointing out my blind spots. And I find
you don't have any, Al.
Jared's very good at pointing out blind spots, Al. That's his specialty.
I'm going to ask you a question, Murph, about Al, because you're really keen to get Al, and it's great to have a client on. But what do you see in Al? You mentioned that leadership group. So what did you see in Al, and how have you seen Al evolve over the years?
Right from the word go, as I said, there was a group of young people in that first Caterpillar conference where we ran a workshop, didn't we, Al? Because I was there for 3 days, I think, and pretty quickly we identified this group of people, and then we grabbed all that young group together and said, hey, why don't we spend a little bit more time with you, because you're going to be influential going forward. So what I saw in that group, and Alister particularly, is a curiosity to learn, like that, and that's what I've always enjoyed about working with Al. Is he wants to get the best out of his team, and he's always curious about how he can do it. But also, I was going to ask you in a second, Al, about he's always open to feedback, which I love, and he doesn't always like it, mind you, but he is always open to it. And I remember a phone conversation. I was actually walking around Royal Park. I remember where I was, and at the end of it, I said to Al, I think your self-talk's dropped off a bit, mate. I think you're a bit negative. You're seeing the world through a bit of a negative prism. And I think he rang me back the next day or sent me a text and said, hey, thanks, I've thought about that, and you're right. So just your ability to, or Alistair's ability to listen to feedback, process it, and then make adjustments to his own behaviour. It demonstrates a level of self-awareness which you need to be a good leader. And so I don't know if you remember the conversation, Al, or if it's
I definitely remember it. Yeah, and I mean that feedback. I think when you've established a foundation, either with a person or within a group, where you can give feedback and they know that it's coming from the right place, that it is really powerful. And Jared and I have, I guess, have got that relationship and that trust where if I know he's saying it and he's seeing something in me, it makes me pause and have a look at at my behaviour and whether it's aligned to what I want it to be aligned to. And yeah, I mean, I distinctly remember that conversation, and I remember coming out of that conversation and changing a few things and actually seeing the impact it had on my team. And that was another blind spot. Like I thought that I was putting on the game face in front of my team and saying all the right things, but they saw through it. And I noticed after that conversation with Jared, I adjusted and I saw the impact on them, and it was a positive one. So yeah, I think having a culture that can give and receive feedback within a team is really important and powerful.
Carly, I'll finish with you, Carly. Is it good? Look, you and I have not met Alister before at all, but it's amazing. Well, it's not amazing. The consistency around good leaders. Talk to that, because, and I'll make a comment at the end because I was on a podcast and I made this comment yesterday, but talk to us about that. The consistency. We've never met Al before. We had a brief conversation with Murph. We trust Murph. Sometimes we shouldn't, but normally it's pretty good.
Depends what it's about.
But talk about that, Carly, because it's really clear, isn't it?
Yeah, and it comes back to something earlier in my career, Ruzi, and I might have mentioned this to you before, that I always thought that leadership's traits were inbuilt. So if you weren't a good communicator, or if you weren't good at understanding people's strengths and weaknesses, you were just like that. And now that, I've been working with the PBD team, and before that, I understand now that leadership is a learnt skill, and that self-awareness is so important in terms of part of that. And that's pretty much, Alister, what you've just talked about then in terms of Jared's question, is that, you're willing to learn, you reflect, and then you adapt. And that is the traits of good leaders. And it kind of comes back to that Patrick Lencioni thing about really good leaders that he's seen in his research are humble, hungry, and smart. And the people that we work with who are great, and you're right, Ruzi, like we haven't met Al before, but I can already tell that those 3 traits are really quite prominent within you and your leadership. And I mean, that's probably being a bit too over the top, given I've only known you for 20 minutes, but can really see those traits. So yeah, I think it's really nice for us in the work that we do to see those positive outcomes. And I think that's why we do the work. And Jez, you've done it for 20 years and you've got lots of relationships like this one with Alister. And it's just always really nice to see those kind of outcomes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I'll just, before Ruzi finishes off, because he does cut me off pretty quick, Al. I did want to highlight one thing you said there about the impact the leader has on their team.
Yeah.
And the fact that sometimes you think you're covering it up, but your team sees through it.
Yeah.
And it's quite profound, and it always astonishes me that leaders think that I'm going through a really bad period and I'm struggling here, but my team doesn't know it. They do, and that awareness to recognize that, change your behaviour, snap out of it, and then allows your team then to start to flourish again.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the comment I was going to make, Murph, was it's fantastic. Al, thanks for coming on. It's awesome just having a chat to you. It was a great, really good
thanks for having me.
But we went through these things yesterday. I was on a podcast yesterday and we went through things, Carly, like, humility and empathy and all that sort of stuff. And then the guy that interviewed me said, well, what happens if your leader doesn't have any of them? And it was really just a spur of the moment answer. I said, let's be really clear. He's not a leader. He's got a title. Okay, so there's a really clear difference between someone with a title and a leader. There's plenty of people out there with titles, CEO, head of this, head of that. But let's be really clear. They're not leaders per se. They've got titles, okay, but people follow them because of the title, not because of the qualities that they have. And I think that was a really interesting on the back of Al coming. So yeah, leader by title, leader by definition or whatever, but the definition of leadership is, the conversation we've had today with Alister, and we've had a number of times, but it's great to get someone else from a different industry and Murph. So thanks a lot. Did you guys play golf together or not? You didn't play that, Murph? I've
never played golf with him. I don't know that
play golf, Murph, or
not? I do about once a year. Yeah. And I hate it. I like it. It's just a really good way to ruin a good walk.
100%. Hey mate, listen, thanks Al, thanks for coming. I know you're in Perth at the moment. You got to head back to Sydney and then you got to go via somewhere else and you got to get in the car and you got to drive. You got a big adventure ahead. But mate, no, that was seriously a really, really good conversation. I really enjoyed that conversation, mate. Really appreciate you coming on. Thanks, Murph.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you, Paul and Carly.
Thanks, Al. That was great.
Yeah, you too, mate. Great to see you. Guys. Thanks for doing it.
Yep. Thanks very much. We'll see you all next week on the Culture Couch Live. Thank you very much.